Let's get rolling here. Okay, so our next main book of focus is gonna be the book of Joshua, um, and we're gonna do an introduction. What I want to do is start in Genesis and go quickly through to get us to Joshua so that it is in context. Um, because God is making promises, and even all the way back to the beginning, there is talk about the land and that land, and we look at the garden. The book of Joshua is presented in the Bible as a return to the land. Now, what's interesting is sin has come in the meantime, and so it's no longer the Garden of Eden. And interestingly, what do you think when you are part of a sinful world and you return to the land, how do you go back in? Well, you know what's interesting? You have to fight your way back in. Uh, and there is a symbol, a metaphor there, is maintaining a relationship. Jesus did all the work for us for salvation. How easy is it to maintain that salvation from our perspective? It's not easy, is it? We have to work every day to not focus on silly things and to focus our mind and everything we do in the context of worshiping God is a battle. So we're going to begin at the beginning, looking at the book of Joshua. And so we'll have a short lesson this week, just introductory. And so we begin with the creation of the world. You know, I copied this out of the Bible and I took its heading. I wouldn't have said the creation of the world. I would have said the creation of everything. In the first verse, it says, in the beginning, and that's a non-specific time, beginning, Bereshit, when it's used in the Bible, and this term is used several times elsewise in the Bible, it's not a specific period of time. And so this first verse is the creation of the universe. God created the heavens and the earth, and they are in the Hebrew it says the sky and the land. It has been translated as heavens and earth, which I do not like either one of those. When we hear heavens, we think about the abode of the gods. Now, that is an ancient concept. I don't really hold to the classic view of heaven. There's not an up and down we know now. We have come along in our cosmologies. This is reflecting an ancient understanding of the universe where they thought the earth was a flat disk and the only place for God to be would be up above. We don't think that anymore. In the New Testament, it tells us that there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. In other words, heaven, I would say 99% I am, that what we say, when we say heaven, we mean we'll be on the new earth with no sin. We'll be here living a similar life, but a life where sin is not a constant annoyance. Sin doesn't separate us from God. We walk the earth with God. We're back in the Garden of Eden. And so I don't like the term of heaven because that's an ancient, it is the sky. The author was looking out his window and he was saying the sky and the land. In the beginning, God, everything that is out there, everything that you can see, God made. And so that's called a hendiades when you take two words and you put them together and they take on a new meaning. Heavens and earth mean the universe, everything, existence. And a beginning period of time, non-specified period of time, God created everything that exists. He's the creator. So a couple things. As I said, beginning is a non-specific term. For us in here, if we talked about when in the beginning of our marriage, how long of a time would we be talking about? Is that the wedding night? The beginning of our marriage? No, it's probably longer than that. I mean, we could be talking about 10 years as the beginning of our marriage. Now, somebody that's been married for a week, what would the beginning of their marriage be? That would be the ceremony. But 50 years later, they wouldn't think about They think about the hardship of that first year, getting used to somebody in your space all the time. Um, and so that's a non-specific term in the Bible. Now, because in the second chapter, in the second part, after verse 2, we begin talking about days. This chapter is organized by a work week, a 7-day work week. We tend to think the beginning is 7 24-hour days, but that is only because it sits next to the model of a work week. In the beginning is non-specific. Now, what am I not saying? I'm not saying that God could not create instantly. I am not saying that it may be 7 24-hour periods. But I believe the range of meaning of that word, and we could go into the other places. Jeremiah 26 verse 1 uses the same phrase, Bereshit, in the beginning of the reign of Jehoiakim. He reigned for 11 years. Then over in chapter 28 of Chronicles, 1 Chronicles 28, it says Zedekiah, in the beginning of Zedekiah, who also reigned for 11 years, and it said in the 4th year. So he was saying out of 11 years, the first 4 years at least could be considered the beginning. So it's not a specific term. And for those people that look at the earth and think, okay, the earth took a long time to make, this term is non-specific. My Hebrew professor used to say, if you need 10 billion years for God to create, feel satisfied, Bereshit, in the beginning, that could be 10 billion years. But it could also be a blink of an eye. So I'm not saying that it's not 7 24-hour days. I'm just saying that the 7 24-hour days is serving a different purpose to organize in terms that we understand, and not necessarily to say this is how long it took God to create. I talked about the Hendites, that's the whole universe. The verb created is very important. There are 2 verbs used in Genesis 1. In Hebrew, it is bara, which is created, and it is asah, to do or to make. And I think they are very intentionally used. Created is only used here. It's used in verse 20. God created the living creatures that moved about. He created the Leviathan, the sea monsters, and the living creatures. So the animals are created. The plants are made. Then when he talks about man, it uses that term bara 3 times. 3 is always for emphasis. It said God created man. In his image, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And so the Bible wants us to know that mankind is a special created, that mankind did not pre-exist God's will, that they were not an inevitability, but that they were created. I do believe that when it says things are made, that leaves some wiggle room for a process. Looking simply at the usage of the verb created and made, I don't think there's a ton of wiggle room for the Bible allowing for a process, for man to come from a process. It says the earth was without form and void. The Hebrew term is tohu vavohu, which means an uninhabitable wilderness. When the Bible was translated into Greek, about 200 years before Jesus was born, Greek was the language of the educated. And so the Hebrew scholars wanted to translate from Hebrew to Greek so that scholars could read. They were also trying to show that Moses came before Aristotle, and that Aristotle borrowed from Moses and not the other way around. Likely. There's a little bit of speculation in that. And so the void and formless is a Greek formulation. That's Greek cosmology. They very much like the spinning gases. But in the Hebrew, It just says the earth existed, but it was an uninhabitable wilderness. Man could not live there. And so I tend to think that verse 1 is the creation story. When you talk about what is creation story, it's verse 1. What does God want you to know about creation? In a beginning period of time, God created all that exists. That's the emphasis of the Bible, not how long it took, not what processes it took, not, imagine the things. And when he made the earth, man couldn't live there. God had to bring order. It was chaos. So very important in the understanding of the ancient mind, they believed that before creation, there was just an ocean, a wild, chaotic ocean. And if you dropped man in that ocean, he would die. Man could not exist in the chaos. And so in order for us to exist, God had to bring order. And that's what it apparently says. Oh, one other term. One other thing about verse 1. When it says earth, what do you envision? That globe over there, a ball. Do you think Moses was thinking about a ball? So I don't like that translation. What it says in Hebrew is ha'aretz, the land. And so he was looking out his wind, and he said, God created the land, the sky and the land. And to put earth in there, for modern people, it changes the way we view everything that's said. We view it from a modern perspective. We all envision a round ball that's blue and it's got the yellow-brown continents. Just the term continent, was that in Moses' vocabulary? Did he have a concept of a continent? Not at all, not in the least. Surrounded by ocean? No. And so I don't like the translation earth. I think the translators are doing us a disservice when they put earth in there. There is another word for a globe in Hebrew. It's in the Psalms. And this is a distinct word. This is the land. And why that is important is the Jews return to the land. That is, God made a place to have fellowship with the Jews. They live now in the land, Haaretz. There's a newspaper in Israel called Haaretz, the land. It's not the earth. They didn't return to the earth. They returned to the land. So it's significant. So the earth was an uninhabitable wilderness. It was underwater. And interestingly, science agrees that in the processes that the earth was once covered with water. And so that does match with science, which is not necessary, but it's nice when it happens. And darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So you see right there in verse 1 and verse 2, two persons of the Trinity, the Spirit of God and God the Creator. Now, here's an interesting tidbit. The Syriac, which is an Aramaic translation of the Bible that predates our oldest manuscript by a couple hundred years, when it translated the Hebrew from Hebrew to Aramaic, Bereshit, in the beginning, it translated it, in the beginning, in the firstborn Son, God created the heavens and the earth, and then the Spirit hovered above the face of the water. Now, that term Bereshit means in the best, in the beginning time, in the best time. One of the uses of this term Bereshit is with in Genesis 49, when Jacob is giving out his blessings to his 12 sons. He says to Reuben, Reuben, you are the Bereshit. You are the beginning of my strength. You are the best, my most vital. And so they believe that Bereshit, they translated it in the firstborn son because that is such a valuable thing. Now, we like that because we're Trinitarian Christians. And going from the Syriac, you have the Trinity in the first two terms of the Bible, first two verses of the Bible. though that is not really good exegesis there. The Spirit of God, did God leave us in an uninhabitable wilderness? Did he leave us in darkness? No, the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Now the Spirit of God hovering over the waters is a view that you see in many of the ancient polytheistic mythologies, where the storm god strikes the water with a hammer or with lightning and forces it to allow the land to come up. And so it's a common scene. So does God use violence to force the other gods to bow to his will? No. People charge that that might have been an antecedent version that was corrected by the Bible authors. But what the Bible says is, rather than hit, God spoke, and the creation obeyed him. There was no challenge. There was no challenge to his authority. There was no other god that he had to defeat to be the king of the gods, that he was all powerful. And God, rather than hit, God said, let there be light. And what happened? He had to fight to get light? No. And there was light. So we skip on down. We had talked about this. So we go into a process using the model of a work week to organize information. God is preparing the nursery for mankind to come, for those intermediate verses between verse 3 and verse 26. He is preparing the nursery, making the world good for man. He brings the land up so that man can live on it. Then once he had done that work, God said, let us, again, who is God talking to? Who is us? How can God, being one, say, let us? Well, we Baptists know the answer. It's Jesus and the Holy Spirit. It's clear as the nose on your face. Though other people would argue with that. Let the three of us, being the one God, make man in our image after our likeness. Let's jump forward. The woman is going to sin by disobeying God. She sees that the fruit is attractive for food. She sees that it's good for making one wise. What is she trying to do in eating that fruit? She's trying to make herself like God. But what did she already have? She was created like God. So the only thing she could do is disobey. And let them, who is it talking about? It's them, have dominion over the fish of the sea, birds of the air, over livestock, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Who is them? Well, it's mankind. That term, there's a term in Hebrew for them, is used in the next verse. And I highlighted it in green. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So 3 times he says, it emphasizes created. There was not humankind, now there is. And he created them, and God blessed them. Who's he talking about? Male and female, right from the beginning. We're still in chapter 1 of the whole Bible. And God is saying, male and female, I've created them. Now, do y'all see where it says, and I'm going to create without sin, I'm going to make man the boss man? No. That will come later. There will be a necessary roles in the household, because sin is going to bring about a violent and dangerous world. And in God's orders, once sin enters and the world becomes dangerous, there will be a necessary order in the household. But was that the created in the perfect world? He created them, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion. does it say let man have dominion? No, it says let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth. Now that'll be important in a moment. And God said, behold, I've given you every plant over the face of the earth, every tree and fruit you shall have for food, to every beast of the earth, bird, thing that creeps, everything that has breath. I have given every green plant for food, and it was so. And God saw that everything he had made, that he had created in verse 1, and then he had brought order to over a 7-day work week as a model to organize the information. Notice the term made rather than created. Created in verse 1, then organized, made after that. And there was evening and there was morning on the 6th day. And the thee there is an interpretation. There are no these for the days. It says on a 6th day, on a first day, on a second day, not the first day and the second day. All right. Are there any questions about that? That was going really fast over some important material. Now, the reason we go into this is because all of these things are important when we get back to the promised land. I want us to have in view, and we're going to go into chapter 2 next week. All of these concepts are important when the Israelites, after 400 to 500 years of promise, from the time of Abraham, they are promised the land. 500 years later, they come back to the gates of Jericho, returning to the promises made in the first chapter. And that's why we're going back into this. Are there any questions or comments about that? Okay, well, let's stop there then, and we will pick up in chapter 2 next week.